This is Dan Bostic, Artistic Director of Fullcast Audio. We hope you've enjoyed this production of Circle of Magic, Sandry's book, which was written and narrated by Tamora Pierce. Because the world of Circle of Magic is so unique, we thought you might enjoy knowing where it came from. So we asked Tammy to talk a little about the ideas behind this fantasy world, where they came from, and how they grew. Now here's Tammy herself to share with you the story behind the story and explain how this book came to be written.
All my life, through fairy tales and my own private imagination, I always looked for the magic in the everyday, in holes in the walls in Dunbar, where I grew up, where I turned it into a complete home for leprechauns. When I got to Greek and Roman mythology, and much later in life to Japanese mythology, the idea that there could be gods and spirits in rivers and mountains and stones and trees was quite natural to me with my imaginings as a young child. I kept wanting to find magic in the everyday. I'm rather down to earth for a fantasy writer. I don't sweep around in capes, I wear jeans. While I've done work with mages and wands and swirling capes and knights in shining armor, I still had that itch of common everyday people using common everyday things to become magic and to create magic. It started to come together for me one winter's night. I was sitting with my mother and my sister and my father watching television, and Ma and Kim had both picked up balls of yarn and crochet needles and had sat there and watched television and talked, and while they did so, the needles began to flash. They did it without even looking at it, and as they worked, the balls of yarn turned into wads of cloth that grew and tumbled out of their laps. And as I sat there with my own clumsy hands watching them and muttering under my breath, "I just write," I thought, now this is real magic, what they are doing here. That was where I think I really got obsessed with the idea of thread magic. I also knew some about thread magic from my research in the occult in college, so the two went into some stew pot in my brain and started fermenting. In addition to that, one of the things that my post-college fascination with Japan led me to was the craft of the bonsai. I've always loved bonsai trees. I've always thought that here again is magic with something as mundane as a tree, made small and perfect and laid out in a small and perfect way. At the same time that I was turning these ideas over in my mind, getting my writing career going, I became part of a radio company. And among our actors, we had a gentleman who was an artist jeweler. But it wasn't just that he'd worked with silver and gold, and in fact, he doesn't much care for silver and gold. He works with formica and bakelite and ebony and teak. He also has done, in the course of a very long career, weaving and sewing and glass blowing, metalworking of all kinds, woodworking, architecture. I watched him and I listened to his stories, and once again, I was looking at this man who had the long flowing hair, the heavy brows, the full mustache, and thinking, if ever there is a mage in this world, my friend is it, and the magic that he works is through things that he does with his hands. At the same time that the idea of everyday magic and crafts came into my mind, I was also considering a paradigm shift. I wanted to get away from white feudal Europe and try something new. I'd always been fascinated by the Middle East and Central Asia. I grew up on reading books by Kipling and T.E. Lawrence and Sir Richard Burton, and reading historical fiction about Islamic culture and about the Silk Roads and the Khyber Pass. And to this day, the words Silk Road or Khyber Pass or Taklamakan, the great desert that the caravans had to cross, still raise goosebumps on my skin. And I live in New York City, and I'm looking at this wonderful mix of cultures and languages and races, and I thought, I want to do something a bit more like the Middle East and Central Asia were in the Middle Ages, a vast melting pot of cultures coming from all four directions and mingling together, trading, intermarrying, fighting, and offering this banquet of ideas and realities and customs. That was the beginning of the Circle of Magic universe, when I brought together those ideas with that of a group hero, which I wanted to work with, and with craft magic, I realized I had something that I loved very much.